Father Jam, pull me out on a tight spot. Let me listen. Anglicans on the move right now. Laborers in the new wine vineyard. Anglicans on the move right now. Laborers in the new wine vineyard. Heeding to the call, rallying for a cause. Anglicans on the move right now. Hear the Anglican voice, and up if Jesus is your choice. You better come show and rejoice if you know God coming for the girls and the boys. It doesn't matter what time Jesus calls you after. What matters is as long as you answer. I will shake up his spine to get some of that brand new wine. Anglicans on the move right now. Anglicans on the move right now. Heeding to the call, rallying for a cause. Anglicans on the move right now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Phaedra Pear, and I welcome you to today's edition of the Anglican Voice, a program that is produced by the Incorporated Trustees of the Anglican Church in Trinidad and Tobago and aired here on I-95 every weekend. We thank you for joining us, and we hope that what we discuss in the coming hour will be thought-provoking and help you in your journey with Christ. My co-host for this evening is none other than Tishon Francis. Good evening, Tishon.
Good evening, Dr. Pierre. Good evening to our listeners.
Okay, and I'm going to ask Tishon to lead us in prayer before we begin.
Not a problem. Heavenly Father, we come before you, God, with our hearts, souls, and minds open as we engage in a topic this evening that may be touchy to us. Help us, Father, to be able to answer the questions that our listeners may be needing. Help us to be able to produce a show full with information, educational purposes that can help us as a church understand things in the world that we seem not to know or we assume that we know. I ask you to guide the words of myself and our host, Dr. Pierre, as well as our guests this evening. I pray that in this hour that we have with you and our listeners, that we do justice. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen and amen. Thank you very much, Tishon. And as Tishon implied in her prayer, we are touching a topic that, sometimes people feel is kind of taboo for the church to touch on. We are in the carnival season, and we know that there are some quarters who believe that there should be no intersection between church and carnival. Just like in the American system, they say no interaction between church and state. So in our context, sometimes we do have that sentiment that there should be no intersection between church and carnival. The reality of the situation, though, is that there have been interactions. And as we begin the program this evening, we're going to start off with a Calypso from 1967, a Calypso that was sung by the mighty Cypher, which talks about that interaction between church and carnival, even way back in the 60s. So take a listen, and then I will introduce our guest, and we'll have our discussion about the church and carnival.
Last carnival, you're talking about bacchanal. Last carnival, You're talking about Bacchanal, some people from Dabadi, all of them the same family. Mildred to rum inside a glass, and Auntie's sister while playing my shouting.
If the priest could play, who is me?
I mean from Dabadi.
If the priest could play, who is me?
I don't care who see.
If the priest could play, who is me?
You're talking about Bacchanal.
If the priest could play, who is me?
I mean for the carnival. Play man. Those people had a law, never to play mass before. But since they see the priest play, they decide to break away. These girls in the tight pants had the whole public in France. The brother wearing the sister dress with two orange tie upon his chest balling.
If the priest could play, who is me?
I mean from Dabadi.
If the priest could play, who is me?
I don't care who see.
If the priest could play, who is me?
You're talking about Bacchanal.
If the priest could play, who is me?
I mean for the carnival. Play man. I'm a mass. What made the band post class? Every man played a different mask. Some playing police and thief, some playing arrest the priest. A fella that called your goat, tie his neck with a bunga rope. Lay down on the ground and close the eye, how do you know? He playing commit suicide singing.
If the priest could play, who is me?
I mean from Dabadi.
If the priest could play, who is me?
I don't care who see.
If the priest could play, who is me?
You're talking about Bacchanal.
If the priest could play, who is me?
Play man. Carnival. Tuesday afternoon, they start with bottle and spoon. If you hear them coming down, tickling, tickling-ting-tong. Leader the band, he began to rhyme. He wearing a pants you don't know behind. He said, since I born, I ain't play no mask. And who don't like it could kiss my face because
If the priest could play, who is me?
I'm a mask.
If the priest could play, who is me?
Ah, boys is mask.
If the priest could play, who is me?
Ah, boys is mask.
If the priest could play, who is me?
Hey, man.
Welcome back. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with that Calypso by the Mighty Cypher. If the priest could play, who is we? And our guest for this evening is going to talk about that concept. And I am very happy to introduce Reverend Cliff Rawlings. Reverend Rawlings has done a book talking about that interaction, talking about the provocation of church and carnival and culture. And we are so happy, even though, people will say, but he is not Anglican. That's all right. He is a great friend of the Anglican Church. I know that he has done work with the cathedral, and I'm sure with other Anglican churches as well. So sometimes we have had him in the past to do some Bible study and to do some special services and that kind of stuff. So Reverend Rawlings is not a stranger to the Anglican Church, and we welcome you to the Anglican Voice this evening, Reverend Rawlings.
Thank you very much, and it is a pleasure for me to be here sharing with you in this forum this evening.
Yes. So as we started off with that, Calypso, you want to say a little bit about that before we get into your book?
Sure. Mighty Cypher was singing about the Anglican priest in St. James the Just Parish in Sangre Grande at the time, who was Father Clifford Hendy. No relation, even though we have the same first name. And he played Mass for the first time around that era. And it caused quite a stir, that somebody could come from the sacred into not only the secular, but into the profane, the profanities of carnival and engage the church and scandalize the church in that regard. How could the sacred become part of the profane? And there was also another Calypso, I think it was by Lord Christo, I can't remember exactly, Play a Mass Rev, that celebrated this particular episode in the church's history.
Okay, so we've had occasions of that intersection between the church and carnival, and we'll go into more of that as we go through this hour. But I want to point out to people that you have written a book called A Theology of Carnival and Other Provocations. Could you tell us about the book a little?
Yes, indeed. It came out of a study in trying to revive Caribbean contextual theology, doing theology on the Caribbean landscape, trying to see God at work in our culture, in our language, in our way of life and way of being, and trying to encourage a Caribbean way of being, self-determination and identity after the colonial era, this post-independence, post-colonial era, trying to find out who we are and to identify ourselves as a unique people who've come from distant lands and being placed on a new landscape, given new roots, putting down new roots in a new place, and how can we find ourselves and how can we validate what we have received and how we've been evolving over the last 50, 60 years or so. So it's within that context.
Okay, so I know that I think the beginning of the book talks a lot about, as you just mentioned, coming out of our colonial experience and the I don't want to say the roots, because Carnival, I think, started before the end of colonialism. I mean, sometimes when you hear the historical roots, we go back to African ceremonies, African rites and rituals, as well as the colonial influences from France and England.
Yes, it has those two founts of origin, particularly France, that and as we're talking about the church's relationship with Carnival, Carnival came out of that as a pre-Lenten last-minute dash to enjoy yourself before you go into the stringent fasts of Lent. And within that era, the fast, particularly in the Roman Catholic Church, would have been even stricter than how they're practiced today. So it developed that you would have a last-minute fling with and a carnival really means farewell to the flesh, a fling of not only eating flesh, but also engaging in activities of the flesh for the last time before you go into these 40 days where you're supposed to rid yourself of all these mortal cravings, these carnal desires, as it were, to prepare for Easter. So it has come out of that, and so it is because of the date of Ash Wednesday that we have our carnival at that particular time, the 2 days before. So there is that found, and then there's all and out of that the found that came from our African ancestors, where as enslaved people on the estates, they began first of all to parody what the slave masters were doing, and realizing that they started to create their own theater out of all the cultural traditions that they had inherent with them as a people. So they started to encourage that. So it became not just a parody of what the slave masters were doing, but it became their theater, to present themselves on the stage and to give themselves a sense of self-worth and affirmation of who they were as a people. This was their form of entertainment. And along with that, it became theater as well as a means of resistance and revolution. And I think this is one of the reasons why Trinidad, as a separate colony from Tobago and all the others, Trinidad did not have any serious slave rebellion or uprising as they did in Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, Tobago, and so on. We had one or two little skirmishes here and there, but there was no serious rebellion because Carnival replaced that. Carnival was our rebellion, was our form of showing the evils of slavery and the whole sugar plantation system. So this was the way we portrayed ourselves, both in theater and in terms of an act of resistance and rebellion against slavery.
Well, it's interesting that you would talk about that aspect of Carnival because, for instance, over the past 2 years, we've had a lot of restrictions on our being, on our movements, on our interactions and that kind of stuff. And you know, this carnival has been termed the mother of all carnivals. That gives us an opportunity to, I suppose some people would say, vent after 2 years of, and I'm putting in inverted commas, oppression.
It has always had that element to it. People always say, oh, we work hard all during the year. Carnival is the time to play yourself and to vent and to get rid of all your stresses and frustrations and so on. So I would expect, yes, this year more than any other time before, except perhaps after the 5-year ban because of World War II. But after that, and then we had the polio outbreak in 1972. They had to postpone it from the regular time until later on in May. But yes, I would think that all this pent-up frustration and energy and so on is just is being released bit by bit and is ready to explode on Carnival Monday and Tuesday.
And as you speak about the whole idea of where Carnival came from, historical aspect of it, but as you mentioned in the beginning about Carnival being put into place just before Ash Wednesday, the persons have the ability to, play yourself or enjoy the things of the flesh. It makes me wonder, to a sense, that we like to, and I say we generally, as in a generic we like to say Carnival is a worldly thing and not something of God, or there's sometimes that topics like that. But if we are being honest with ourselves, then would you say that at the end of the day, Carnival really is just an expression of ourselves as we are, as people?
It has evolved from those two forms of origin, as I mentioned before, the pre-Lenten festival, as well as the African theater and a theater of resistance and rebellion, of parody, resistance and rebellion. It has evolved from that into becoming something that is essentially Trinbagonian. This is who we are. And it is part of the fiber of our being. And our whole understanding is to try to reach to that place where we can identify ourselves. Who are we, coming out of enslavement, coming out of the plantations, coming out of colonialism, repression and suppression? Who have we become? What kind of people are we? And Carnival is that. So Carnival is not, to me, is no longer restricted to just a pre-Lenten festival, and people say, well, oh, you go and you play and you get on bad for Carnival, and then you want to come and play Holy Ash Wednesday and get ashes and so on. It has evolved to more than that. It has evolved into something that makes us truly Trinbagonian. I experienced this when I was doing my probationary period of my internship in Scotland with the Church of Scotland, where I was ordained back in 1996, 1997. And I had always liked Carnival, and I remember I told myself that the previous year, okay, I know that the following year I'm going to miss this thing, so let me, try and enjoy myself as much as possible. And when I was up there, I remember Carnival Monday, going to do primary school worship, 2 primary schools in the morning, a secondary school in the afternoon. Carnival Tuesday, I had to go hospital visitation and so on, and everybody was up and about doing their normal, trivial rounds and common tasks. And I was asking, don't they realize what's taking place on the other side of the world? And we didn't have internet back in the day and so on. So I felt lost. And I asked a friend of mine, I said, what do you all do with Shrove Tuesday? What do you all do? And he was like, well, you put extra butter on the pancakes. And I was like, that's all. And then I realized how trini I was, to miss this quintessential festival that defines us as a Trinbagonian people. This is not just something we do. This is who we are. It has become part of our culture, part of our being. And we've got to recognize that carnival is what makes us, is one of the things that makes us Trinbagonian people. Trini to the bone, as David Rodder would say.
Yeah, well, Rev, I could fully relate to that because I did all of my tertiary education abroad. And I will tell you, I was very much involved in the International Students Association. And I used to work for a time in the International Students Office. And our director there, Mr. Ben used to say he could tell when it was carnival because half the trainees would disappear from campus because they would come home, and the other half of the trainees would be depressed.
Of course.
He didn't have to look at the calendar. He didn't have to whatever. He just knew because it was such a part of us as Trinidadians that,
yes,
it was reflected in our behavior.
It is. And sometimes even if we're not aware of it deliberately, it does affect. It does affect our behavior.
But I like to state as this that I think carnival itself, and as we speak, I get the sense that carnival kind of centers around the 2 days before the carnival Monday and Tuesday. But carnival itself is a whole season as it is. It starts just after Christmas, where you have all the different all-inclusives and events. But it also includes panorama. It includes the stick fighting competition. It includes Calypso Monarch. Unfortunately, I don't think we're having a soca Monarch, but carnival is all these different aspects all in one. So when you say things like the church and carnival, and some persons may not be into it, I beg to raise the point. Then we have many different churches that allow street band in church. So why then will we say church and carnival is something that needs to be separated when culturally it's just who we are? It's different aspects of who we are played out in a very intense way to just give us that freedom.
And you're quite correct. It's not just the 2 days. It's not just the parade on the streets. It's a whole season. It has always been, even from those plantation days. It has always been that whole season from Christmas leading right up to the 2 days before Ash Wednesday. And it involves all those activities. So we've got to see it as a whole and not separate it into parts. You're quite correct.
I want to kind of tack back and ask you to go a little bit more into, because I think you mentioned it in your book, the fact that it's not only theater as such. Yes, it gave the African slaves an opportunity to portray themselves and be seen after a period of really being oppressed and repressed. But the fact that carnival was also, I suppose, a critique of the social conditions at the time, a way of pointing out some of the injustices, social injustices that were so, I suppose, accepted, such a norm at the point in time. Could you speak a little to that?
Sure. Take, for instance, the common condemnation that carnival is devil mass, right? And people playing the devil and they're dressing up like that, and you're not only playing the devil, but the people outside have to pay the devil so that the devil would stop tormenting them and so on. And look at what all they're playing, devil, portraying the devil and so on. But if you realize who the devil is, and still is in our old mass characters, Jab Molassie is French Creole, French patois, devil, the molasses devil. They were not playing devil mass to engage in satanic ritual. They were portraying the Jab Molassie, the molasses devil, the devil of sugar, the sugar plantation, the sugar slavery where molasses comes from. And molasses is the devil, sugar is the devil, that whole slave plantation feudal system. That is the devil. It had people, a rope around your neck or chained and the whip beating you and fire coming out and tormenting people and frightening people. So it was a portrayal. They portrayed onto the stage all their pain, their suffering, their frustration. One man with a rope a rope around his neck and the other one behind him pulling it and then beating him with a whip and so on, and with a fork looking as if he's going to stick him and choke him and so on. So it's this the devilry of what slavery was. So they, rather than rebel because they felt that they were powerless to rebel in terms of violence, we rebelled in terms of portraying onto the carnival stage our rebellion, the sugar devil, the unwanted children, the baby dolls, the men who neglect their families, the saga boys, all the anti-heroes, as I call them, the anti-heroes of Western society were celebrated. The midnight robber who was like a Robin Hood, robbing from the rich to give to the poor because the poor people don't have and suffering. The Pierrot Grenade who mimicked all the verbose expressions of the European languages. The Dame Lorraine who mimicked the white bottoms of the women and of the French society and so on. It was a way out of that parody. It was a way of portraying their rebellion against this institution of slavery and the whole plantation system that kept people subjugated. So it speaks to that, and as I said, it allowed us to vent in that particular way. The stick fighting, which came out of African martial arts, the wearing of the masks and the types of masks that would hide. Masks in African, Western African tradition was supposed to hide a person from the evil spirits that were passing, so that you were disguised and you were bypassed because they couldn't recognize you when they were coming to do malevolence. So they would go to somebody who is unsuspecting, So the wearing of the mask would hide you from the evils of the plantation system. So it is from that perspective of resistance and rebellion and revolution, and which saved us, I would say, from the whole violent culture. Say, for instance, the heavy physical presence of the Maroons in Jamaica, and Kofi and others in Guyana and whatnot, who had serious upheavals. Our upheaval, and it was not just a one-off thing. Our upheaval took place every year in this particular regard. So people were able to portray onto the stage their rebellion. So it's not devil mask, but it was portraying the devilish system. And we have those systems today that keep people enchained, economic structures, structures of injustice that keep people out, quite a sector of our society still not represented on the Equal Opportunities Commission. They can't have redress and recourse to the courts if some injustice is done to them, and a political system that does not want to cater for everyone or to ensure that everybody has their just and equal deserts, that has equality before the law. So people feel enchained, people feel repressed. So many people, and especially coming out of COVID, the COVID-19 restrictions, many have lost their jobs, they've lost their income, they've lost hope for life. So many people are suffering, many people starving, many people don't have enough to provide for their families or children to go to school. So we still have, seen in the devil mask, the devilish economic and societal structures that keep people down, but also keep people out of the celebration of life. So it's still meaningful in that regard, because I always say, even in our work system, the way employers treat employees and so on, we are living in a neo-slavery society. Slavery is still with us. That whole plantation mindset is still with us in our employer-employee relationships. So all of that, that's why Carnival is so needed to vent in this particular way all the frustrations and the restrictions of an unjust society.
Wow, I'm sure that many people never thought of those kinds of insights, because sometimes we just look at the surface. We look at the pretty masks. We complain about the beads and bikinis, and we don't sometimes dig deeper. My students up at UE, I always tell them, dig deeper. Look under the surface. Don't just be superficial, because there are lots of issues that this thing called Carnival addresses. that we might not even be aware of.
Definitely so. And to bring the whole Christian perspective into it, is not just we who are, doing this on our own. If we look at the ministry of our Lord Jesus, it was a ministry of engagement with the rabble-rousers, the publicans, eating and drinking with publicans and sinners. The Pharisees one time said, but Jesus had to tell the Pharisees, he said, John the Baptist came neither eating and drinking, and he was wearing a coat of camel's hair, and you say, look, John have a demon in him. He said, the Son of Man came eating and drinking and dancing, and you say, look, he could ever be a prophet, So he was engaging with people. It was not a ministry of escapism where you escape from the things of the world and you go off to keep your sanity, to keep your holiness untainted and untouched. But it was a ministry of engagement with the lower levels of society, which we would call in Trinidad and Tobago the Jamet class. And the word Jamet comes from the French word diamètre, which is a diameter, the diameter of a sphere or a circle. And there were those who were at the upper echelons of the society, and there were those who were the Jamet class, who were below. So the respectable levels of society, And Jesus engaged with Jamet class. He engaged with the Jamets. He didn't run away or even try to get them away. And they said, look, your master eats and drinks with sinners and publicans and prostitutes and so on. What kind of rabbi is he? So I believe that it is out of this engagement that we are able to identify, to get some sense of identity of who we are, and to get some sense of relief and to know that the Lord identifies with us in our pain, in our suffering, that he was crucified, and that he shares this experience with us, because he's a God who shares in our pain and our grief and our suffering, and not a God who wants to escape or wants us to escape reality, but to face reality and to say that through this engagement, we are going to come out, as the song says, we shall overcome someday.
We can make it if we try.
Oh, yes. Oh, God bless the soul of Black Stallion. Yes. Yes.
Yes. So I think one of the things that for me also comes out of the whole, two of the things. Well, let me start with one, is the whole idea of transformation, and transformation in so many different ways. I remember once I was downtown watching Mass, and this, I don't know what the character is called, but there's, it's a lot of like grass and moss and that kind of stuff covering. And as you talked about the mask, I remember that. And this person came up behind me and they said, Dr. Pear. And I looked up and I was like, this is a carnival character. I mean, it's not nobody that I know, right? But they called my name. And I realized that it was actually one of our politicians who, was transformed and was able to, I suppose, use the mask, as you said, to hide, to enjoy himself without the spectacle, the attention, that would usually happen for known figures. So, that whole thing about transformation is a big part of this carnival phenomena as well.
And that is what it is. We are called not just to be, but we are called to become. And it is, so carnival gives us an opportunity to become something that we've always wanted to become. We've always wanted to portray. And there's a little bit of philosophy in this as well, where we've received René Descartes' formula, I think, therefore I am. And people accept that, as a rule of thumb, as a cliche statement. But in my book, and I have changed it around, and I have said that in terms of Christian existentialism, a Christian way of being, it is I am, therefore I think. And that we have been possessed of these innate desires, and they come out of our inner being, and we portray them on the carnival stage. So I want to play a sailor mass. I want to play an Indian mass. I want to play a Roman soldier. I want to play, a butterfly. I want things like that. So And so we portray ourselves because of what we are possessed. And there is a little bit of hypocrisy in that as well, because we portray these things, we hide under the mask, and then by Ash Wednesday, we go back into our regular selves, and it's as if it didn't happen. And a lot of us would like to deny what we have played before. Take a very controversial subject of the whole LGBT issue and so on. I know a lot of men, I've seen them in my neighborhoods, I've seen them as extensions of my family and so on. A lot of men who like to play this macho, homophobic attitude all during the year. But come Carnival Monday for Juve, they're dressing up in nightie and they transvestite and they put on all the women's clothes and everything. They go and they play themselves and they have a good time on Juve. And then they come back by Ash Wednesday, back into their homophobic attitude, and they hate this and they hate that and they don't like this one and they don't like that one and all kinds of stuff. But give them a chance to play Juve morning, that is what they play. And the word hypocrisy itself is the Greek word for acting. So yes, they acted, and they acted, I believe, from a position of I am, and therefore I portray this, rather than by portraying this, I bring it from outside into inside. No, it is from inside that it comes out on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. So it is a sense of becoming and transforming, as you rightly say.
And as you just pointed out, remember, Jesus also said, it's not the things that we take into our bodies. When the Pharisees were criticizing him that the disciples were eating, I think, the holy bread, or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, the showbread, yes.
It's not what we take into our bodies that defiles us, but it is what comes out of our hearts.
Certainly true, yes.
So these external things that we talk about with Carnival and trying to say, well, the mass is bad, it's a devil thing, it's all of that. It's not so much about the things that are outside that can get into us, but our hearts. Where are our hearts in the whole process?
That's it. Our whole sense of being, of who are we? That is what it calls into question. Who are we as individuals? And then who are we as a people? I find more goodwill at Carnival time than at Christmas. And yes, Christmas is a time of peace and goodwill. I love Christmas. We all do. But I also find a lot, maybe equal or even more goodwill and an intention to listen. We have to make this thing peaceful because everybody wants to enjoy it. And then we also have people coming from outside. We want to give a good show. So there is so much goodwill, peace and goodwill at Carnival time that really calls into question, who are we as individuals and who are we as a people that we can transform at this particular season into something we've always wanted to become. So it's a sense of becoming and calling an identity.
As we talk about identities and transforming and, becoming sometimes the things in ourselves that we try to hide, I'm going to play a little devil advocate for a moment and ask that Carnival itself isn't the problem or the issue, I would say, but how we use it or how we may abuse it, because in anything that's good, we do see abuse of it. So what would you say for the sense of people using Carnival as a form of engaging in things for themselves that they wouldn't do on a normal day?
I think there is a sense of the taboo, of the forbidden, crossing lines of demarcation. Human beings have always been curious. That is what the creation narrative shows us in the Garden of Eden. God marked a line and said, don't cross here, we play fast. And Trinis, we like to play fast on outer place, right? So you play fast and you cross. I want to see what it have on the other side. I want to see what it is like, and so we get to do that. Some of us do it brazenly, but as Dr. Pierre mentioned with this a political person in political affairs, we do it under the mask, so we can hide and we can cross freely, because you see, if you go in your own person, the spirits will find you out. But if you put on a mask, you can cross those lines freely. You could cross from spirit into physical. You could cross from anything, any line of demarcation you want. You have on a mask, so you cannot be found out. The spirits will not mark you. That's our African spiritual heritage. So you put on the mask and you can cross any line of demarcation. You can play yourself. And if the priest could play it, well, who is me? and you have that freedom, that limitless freedom to cross and break the lines of demarcation, to break the taboos, to do the forbidden, and this is where it may call into contact our holiness, our understanding of God, but if we have the mask, then we can even bypass God technically, although God can see behind the mask and see and know us for ourselves, yet somehow behind the mask we could say it wasn't me, that was somebody else and so on. But we feel that we have that freedom to break the taboos, and that's all part of the carnivalesque. That's all part of playing mass. We can't get away from that we can cross the line. That's why people feel, well, they can cross any kind of lines that they want and then come back into the regular and say, well, it was me.
And I think that is a challenge for us, to make sure that as we participate in the carnival, that we still maintain that identity as God's children. And sometimes people think that is impossible. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's that, it just as God empowers each of us to make decisions, he lets us choose. And I think it's up to us to know where the boundaries are, and therefore behave in ways that would be acceptable to God. That, when we get to the pearly gates and St. Peter says, I remember seeing you on Carnival Monday. Yes, I was there, but I was not profane about it. I was not being licentious and lewd. I was participating and enjoying myself, yes, but I was not being unkind to others. I was not stealing from anybody, murdering, all of those kinds of things. So it comes back to us making choices and making decisions about how we can please God even while we express ourselves.
Totally true. There's a beautiful Jewish prayer that says, "Blessed be God, who has given us all things richly and freely to enjoy." And as you rightly say, that is the challenge. How can we, play ourselves, enjoy ourselves without, offending God, without seeking to break his commandments and, and go against his will? That is always the challenge that is before us, and something to which we aspire. But if you do feel the need to cross a little boundary, to enter into a forbidden zone, because all religions talk about entering into the forbidden. And so if you do feel and you do end up crossing into the forbidden, then the forgiveness of God is always there. And that is where the Ash Wednesday comes in. It's not to say, oh, you go and do this, and then you come and you take it for granted. All who does want to play all this life and then go to church Ash Wednesday. No, it is a sense of recognizing, okay, we indulged, and perhaps we indulged a little bit too much. We overindulged. We did cross some boundaries. But Lord, bring us back by your mercy, and let us remember that we are dust, and to dust we shall return. So it is, to always recognize, yes, there is that temptation to cross the boundary, and that temptation to play fast, to be over curious and to enter into the forbidden. We have to try not to do it, but if we do it, then the mercy of God is always there, because we have a God who recognizes and understands and is willing to forgive us when we come to him, and to recognize, listen, we forgive us our trespasses. We have trespassed, and we need to get back within those boundaries. So the Ash Wednesday comes in.
Power of redemption is.
Yes, it is. Yes. And the power of God to redeem all the injustices that we have portrayed in our mass, all the slavery and the devil's economic structures and so on. The power of God to read, and hopefully for us to work with God to redeem the unjust structures of our society.
Wow. Deep. The last thing that I think I want to just touch a little bit on. So we've been talking a lot about the mass, and Tishon mentioned a little bit about the pan and the music. But I also want for us to just talk a little bit about we started off with a Calypso and the importance of Calypso, and how that art form also, how is it related to us as Christians? Because again, some people feel that Calypso is of the devil, just like the rest of Carnival, and that we shouldn't be involved in Calypso singing and the music of Carnival.
Yes. It was spoiler in his Calypso, Portrait of Trinidad by Calypso's All Stories Are Told. And there's a quote attributed to Chief Seattle in the United States, for whom the state of Seattle is named, the shoe chief Seattle, who said, what do you tell your children at night if you don't have a story? And Calypso came out of wanting to tell stories. Our ancient peoples have always told stories. The oral tradition has always been with us. So you have Midnight Robber, Piero Grenade, and then you put that into song. We have, it has degenerated in the sense that it's just wine and jam, and it has become just party music, just on a physical level. And we don't tell stories. We don't share. Long time at Calypso, you had to listen to every verse, and each verse had a different thing leading up to the main conclusion. We've lost that sense of artistry and creativity. So on one hand, it's just wine and jam and naked physical behavior, and the other side is only a set of dead complaining political and social commentary. Oh gosh, we need to get back to telling our stories. Calypso was that art of telling stories, part of our oral traditions. Calypso was also part of our prophetic tradition. A lot of our Calypsonians were prophets, highlighting the issues of the day, as well as preaching against it and giving people a sense of hope, because out of song and music, we create a new world, a utopia where music brings us to that plane that is ethereal, that is sublime, and that takes us up out of the mire and the dross of the injustices of our society into a world where we can work with God to create and realign it according to his vision. So Calypso has that prophetic aspect that we are fast losing because of the wine and jam in particular. We did this whole just raw physical activity, or just sometimes nonsense, it's empty-headedness. Show me your hand. Where's the creativity? Where's the brain in that compared with what we listened to earlier and the host of others of a time past? So there's too much empty-headedness in our modern music, too much of nothing. And we need to get back to some kind of substance, creativity, and imagination in our oral tradition.
And I am glad that you mentioned that prophetic aspect of our Calypso, because if you listen to something like Crazy's In Time to Come,
yes,
when he sang it, the things that he talked about seem to be
far-fetched. Yeah.
It's far-fetched, but if you listen to it today, you'll say, but
yes,
that has
In Time to Come, America will have a black president. I mean, who, as the Americans, who'd have thunk? Who'd have ever thought? Or Black Stallion, we can make it if we try, and so on. They give us hope. Better days are coming, and and that sort of thing. So the hope, that Christian hope for a better world, a better life, instead of the injustices that are portrayed in the devil mask. So Calypso is prophetic in that regard. I totally agree.
Yes. So, as usual, our time together has really gone very quickly as we look at these various aspects and the intersection between Carnival and Christianity and the church. And I think we have to remember that, I think we mentioned it before, that our cultural self needs expression and to be legitimized and to be accepted, rather than hidden and downtrodden. And so this whole thing about Carnival and our creativity and our sense of identity, the importance of that, and being able to engage in a Caribbean theology. So, Father Rawlings, if you could just summarize, give us a last poke at the idea of a Caribbean theology, and not too long because we don't want to go over an hour. But I know that one of the aims of your book was to talk about a Caribbean theology. And sometimes, our churches are portrayed as being, I tell people sometimes the Anglican church is more British than the British. But how does this speak to our Caribbean theology?
If we look at the Gospel according to John, chapter 1 and verse 14, it says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten Son of God, full of grace and truth." And the word glory there is the Hebrew word kabod, which speaks to presence, not just the shiny razzle-dazzle glory, but the presence, glory as the presence of God. And there's one particular modern translation which I love, and it says, "And the Word became a human being and moved into our neighborhood." So Jesus becomes one of us, he's dwelling among us, and we need to hear him speaking as one of us, speaking as a Trinidadian and a Tobagonian with a Trinidadian and Tobagonian accent, with our own particular linguistic expressions, with our own Creole English. We need to hear him speaking and moving and dressing and behaving as a Trinidadian and a Tobagonian, a whole Trinbagonian, and calling us more and more into the full identity of children, sons and daughters of the living God. So we have been taught to speak with an alien voice, the voice of Europe in all its various expressions, French, Spanish, British. So we've been taught to speak now with the North American voice, with all these televangelists coming down, and bombarding the airwaves. And we need, and even from all the peoples who have come here for various reasons, whether as slave masters or as enslaved people and indentured laborers or immigrants and all kinds, we need to recognize that we have come from all these lands, and we have been rerouted in this new land, and we need to give expression to our faith on this new landscape. So it is speaking with a Trinidadian and Tobagonian ethos as identity and language, rather than using, for example, at harvest time, we inherit a harvest based on winter, spring, summer, and fall. So he sends the snow in winter, the warmth to swell the grain, the breezes and the sunshine and the soft, refreshing rain. Yes, we have breeze and sunshine and rain, but we do have snow in winter down here. Why do we keep singing that? So we need to see ourselves on our own culture and our own landscape to express our faith. And this is the challenge of a Caribbean contextual theology, not to speak with any alien voice. And as the Jews said in Psalm 137, being carried off into exile in Babylon, they said, "How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?" And everybody who has come here, for whatever reason in the past, we ask that in our enslaved ancestors, the Indian indentured immigrants, everybody has asked that question. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? V.S. Naipaul wanted, to find his roots and to tell him, no, you're not an Indian, you are West Indian. Laming and them told him, when you're up here, we have no time for Jamaican, Barbadian. You are a West Indian. And he rejected that, so people were saying, you have to accept who you are, where you are. So how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? I say, sing to the Lord a new song. We have become a new people, and we are becoming a new people, new food, new musical instrument, new forms of music, new identity. Sing to the Lord a new song with a new voice, a voice that is truly Trinidadian and Tobagonian, and not any of the alien voices that we have been taught during the colonial era. That's our challenge for Caribbean contextual theology.
Amen.
And to speak with a Barbadian voice, a Guyanese voice, a Jamaican voice, a Dominican voice, in our own particular context as Caribbean people.
Amen, Rev. Amen. I long to hear the voice of Christ in a Pero Grenade. that we could interpret that as a voice of Christ.
Listen, the Scots have a Bible in the Scottish, in Scots, which is their Creole version of English, and it's beautiful. The Jamaicans are doing it. I think it's time we get a Trini Bible. I would love to hear a lot of those gospel dialogues and so on, in a suite, and all the various regional aspects that we have. It's time we get a Trini Bible. The Scots have it, the Jamaicans have it. It's time we get one too. Yes.
All right, Rev. Well, maybe that's the next thing on your plate.
That's something to look into, definitely. Yes.
All right. So I want to encourage you want our listeners to purchase the book. It's called The Theology of Carnival and Other Provocations, written by the Reverend Clifford Rawlings. Rev, where is the book available?
Unfortunately, all local copies have been sold out at present, so we need to restock.
That's a good
which is good, but we'll keep you posted as to when. I'm most likely at Metropolitan Bookstore and from myself. But in the meantime, if you really want to get a copy, you can purchase it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or any of the other international bookstores, online bookstores.
All right. So we really, really want to thank you for being with us this evening, for spending the past hour and giving your views and some very current and topical kinds of perspectives on this thing between the church and Carnival. So
it was indeed my pleasure.
To our listeners out there, I want to wish you a happy and safe, creative, and God-filled Carnival. Next week, our program will be shifted from Sunday evening, obviously, because of the Dimashkara show. So stay tuned for exactly when the Anglican Voice will be on. We wish you the best this week, that you will continue to walk in God's grace. And as we close off, one little reminder that the cathedral is celebrating its 200th anniversary, and we're encouraging our young people to participate in our competitions, our essay writing, poetry, and art competitions. So there are details posted in parish offices and through our schools. If you are interested, if you want your children and grandchildren to participate, feel free to try to access that information, and on all of the social media of the cathedral and of the Anglican Outlook. So as we go, I want to again thank Reverend Rawlings and my co-host, Miss Frances, for being with us this evening, and just to ask Reverend Rawlings to send us off in prayer, please.
Indeed. Let us pray. God our Father, you created the human race in your image and likeness. And you call us not just to be, but to become all that you have given us, to fulfill our human potential, to realize that destiny that you have planted deep within our souls, and to evoke that destiny more and more as we grow from glory to glory, until in heaven we take our place. And so, dear God, as we journey into this evolution of our beings, may we see that you are calling us forward. You are calling this destiny from deep within us, bringing it to the fore. And one of the ways we portray this is through the carnivalesque. We thank you for Carnival, for this stage where we can portray all our frustrations, all our injustices, but also our hopes and our dreams, and that you engage with us. You share life with us, and you let us know that you are leading us on. So may we follow you faithfully, joyfully, and expectantly, knowing that you are leading us into the glory of your presence through all that we experience. May you grant us a safe carnival. And as you share life with us, may we know that we are called to share life with you and to see your glory reflected in all that we do. Grant us your grace in all these things, O God, that we may be faithful to your will and know your presence ever with us. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much, Rev. And I'll give the last word to Sean.
Thank you, Dr. Pierre. And once again, like Dr. Pierre said, thank you very much, Reverend, for your inspirational words and the ways that really help us, work through what Carnival really should mean and what it really should envision, and how we as a church should see ourselves in our culture and embracing it. I should say thank you very much for the words of wisdom.
So thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in, and we see you next week, but look out for the adjusted time. Thank you from the Anglican Voice on I-95.5. Keep safe.